Welcome back to A Cup of History. In our last episode, we learned about the causes of the French Revolution, but today we're moving forward to a more intense part of the revolution, the fall of the monarchy. What happened to King Louis XVI and the royal family?
That's where things really started to take a turn, Chris. By 1791, the revolution was in full swing, and the National Assembly had passed laws limiting the power of the king. Louis XVI went from being an absolute monarch to more of a constitutional figure.
Exactly, but it wasn't enough for many people. Tensions were high, and the royal family tried to escape Paris in June 1791, in what became known as the Flight to Varennes. Louis XVI and his family attempted to flee to Austria, but they were caught and brought back to Paris.
Wait, they tried to run away? Why did they do that?
Because Louis XVI realized that his power was slipping away and that the revolution was turning against the monarchy. By fleeing to Austria, he hoped to get help from foreign allies to regain control over France.
But when they were caught, it was seen as an act of betrayal. It confirmed what many revolutionaries had suspected, that the king couldn't be trusted. It was a major turning point, because from then on, the monarchy's days were numbered.
So what happened next?
After the Flight to Varennes, the monarchy was essentially doomed. In September 1792, the French Republic was declared, and the royal family was imprisoned. Louis XVI was put on trial for treason by the National Convention.
The trial of Louis XVI was a big deal. It was the first time in European history that a king had been put on trial by his own people. The revolutionaries were determined to make an example out of him.
Wow, so they actually put the king on trial? How did that go?
Not well for Louis. In January 1793, he was found guilty of treason and sentenced to death. 24. On January 21, 1793, King Louis XVI was executed by guillotine in the Place de la Révolution in Paris.
They executed the king? That's intense.
It was a shocking moment for the whole world. The execution of Louis XVI marked the end of more than 1,000 years of monarchy in France. It sent shockwaves across Europe, where other monarchies were terrified of similar uprisings.
What about the rest of the royal family?
After Louis XVI's execution, his wife, Queen Marie Antoinette, was also imprisoned. Corsata. She was put on trial later that year and met the same fate as her husband. She was executed by guillotine in October 1793.
I've heard about Marie Antoinette. Didn't she say something about, let them eat cake?
That's a common myth, Chris. There's no real evidence she ever said that. In reality, she was very unpopular because of her extravagant lifestyle and her Austrian background, which made people suspicious of her loyalties.
The death of the king and queen symbolized the complete rejection of the old regime. But the revolution was far from over. In fact, it was about to get much more extreme with the rise of the Reign of Terror.
The Reign of Terror? That sounds ominous.
It was. The Reign of Terror was one of the most violent and radical phases of the revolution. Led by figures like Robespierre, it was a period of mass executions aimed at protecting the revolution from its enemies, both real and imagined.
Thousands of people were executed, many by guillotine, during the Reign of Terror. It was a time of fear and paranoia, as the revolutionaries turned on each other.
Wow, so the revolution just kept getting more intense.
Definitely. The execution of Louis XVI opened the door to even more radical changes. The monarchy was gone, but France was still far from stable.
We'll dive deeper into the Reign of Terror in our next episode. It's one of the most notorious periods of the revolution and had a lasting impact on French society.
I'm really starting to see how complex and dramatic the French Revolution was. Thanks for explaining all of this.
Of course, Chris. We're glad you're enjoying the journey.
See you next time when we explore the Reign of Terror.
Can't wait. See you both then. Okay, last time, we talked about the fall of King Louis XVI and the execution of the royal family. But today, it sounds like things are going to get even more intense. You mentioned the Reign of Terror. What exactly was that?
The Reign of Terror was a period from September 1793 to July 1794, when the revolutionary government, led by figures like Maximilien Robespierre, took extreme measures to protect the revolution from its enemies.
That's right, Chris. During the Reign of Terror, thousands of people were executed, many by guillotine. The revolutionary leaders believed that the revolution was in danger, both from foreign enemies and from internal counter-revolutionaries.
Wait, they were executing their own people? How did it come to that?
It was a time of intense paranoia and fear. The revolutionaries were worried that there were enemies everywhere. Royalists, foreign powers, and even former revolutionaries who were seen as too moderate. To protect the revolution, they felt they had to eliminate any threat.
Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety, which was the main governing body during this time, believed that virtue was the key to the revolution's success. But they also believed that terror was necessary to achieve that virtue.
So they justified the violence as a way to protect the revolution?
Exactly. They believed that in order to create a new, just society, they had to root out anyone who could potentially undermine it. Unfortunately, this led to a lot of innocent people being caught up in the wave of executions.
During the Reign of Terror, anyone suspected of being against the revolution was at risk. This included former nobles, clergy, and even other revolutionaries who were seen as too moderate.
So it wasn't just people who supported the monarchy. They were going after anyone they saw as a threat.
Yes, one of the most famous victims was Georges Danton, who had been a leader of the early revolution. But when he called for a moderation of the terror, he was accused of being a counter-revolutionary and was executed in 1794.
Wow, so even the revolutionaries weren't safe from the guillotine.
That's right. The Reign of Terror became a period of suspicion and betrayal. People would accuse each other of being enemies of the revolution, sometimes just to settle personal scores. It was a dangerous time to be in France.
And during this time, Robespierre himself became more and more powerful. He was seen as the leader of the radical Jacobins, and he believed he was guiding the revolution toward its ultimate goal.
But didn't Robespierre eventually fall from power?
He did. By the summer of 1794, even Robespierre's allies began to turn on him. They feared that if he continued, they could be the next ones sent to the guillotine.
On July 27, 1794, Robespierre was arrested in a coup known as the Thermidorian Reaction. The next day he was executed, and with his death, the Reign of Terror came to an end.
So Robespierre went from being one of the most powerful men in France to losing his life at the guillotine, just like the people he had sentenced.
Exactly. His fall marked the end of the radical phase of the revolution. But France was still far from stable. The country was exhausted from years of violence and instability, and the revolution was entering its next phase.
It's amazing how quickly the revolution went from overthrowing a king to executing its own leaders.
That's the nature of revolutions. They often spiral out of control, and the French Revolution was no exception. But out of this chaos, new political ideas and institutions were born that would shape France and the rest of the world for centuries.
In the next episode, we'll look at the rise of the Directory and how Napoleon Bonaparte came into the picture. He played a huge role in stabilizing France after the chaos of the revolution.
I've heard of Napoleon. I'm excited to learn more about how he rose to power.
You'll see how he took advantage of the post-revolutionary chaos to establish himself as one of the most famous figures in history.
Thanks for joining us today, Chris. We'll dive into Napoleon and the aftermath of the revolution in the next episode.
Can't wait to hear more about it. See you both next time.